Thank you for joining today. Talking Test of the Month. I'm Nick Ellinger, Moore's Chief Brand Officer, and a couple of interesting studies today that take us all over the map. I don't have a theme for this one, just new studies that should be interesting. First is one of the weird side effects that we've seen with COVID is that you've seen those kind of meme of nature is healing, there are dolphins in the East River and all of those sorts of things, but that is really true that so pollution in big cities in China has decreased over the past few years, but COVID shutdowns made it so that some cities had air pollution reductions of a quarter or more. And Chinese big cities are among the highest polluting in the world. And so the question was, is clean air an experience good? What I mean by an experience good is that it's something that you have to experience it before you know how good it's going to be. A restaurant, you can kind of look at reviews, but you never know if it's going to be for you. Medicine's the same sort of way. You have to pay for it before you take it, see if it relieves your symptoms. This presentation is an experience good. You showed up here not knowing how good it was going to be this month. Hopefully, you'll see it. You'll recommend it to a friend, but you don't know going in. And so the question that the researchers had is, some of these cities, they say, oh, it's the first time in people's lifetimes they may have seen a fully blue sky. And so now that you've experienced this, is this something that you want again? And what the study found is that, yes, you do want that again, that cities that had high pollution before and big drops, so huge pollution levels, biggest drops, had more online discussions about environmental protection, and their post-COVID stimulus plans had more green subsidies in them. So how do we trigger this with donors? How do we use the idea of experience goods? Because we're not going to be able to, if we're an environmental organization, and go in and clean up a person's city and say, here's what it would look like. We have to use some other tricks to get people there. And the way that we're going to simulate this a bit is by using Imagine. So there was a great study that came out that said that imagine that you're a refugee fleeing persecution, and really made it concrete for people with details about what would you take, what would you miss about your country, what would be the biggest challenge. So someone's thinking about this at the beginning of a question about who should we let in terms of immigration. And when people were asked to imagine at the very top of the piece, they were less likely to discriminate against Muslims. And I should mention that this was specifically in the context of the Syrian crisis and conflict. Should we grant asylum to folks coming in? Not only was this true across the ideological spectrum, everyone was less likely to want to discriminate when they had this imagined statement right up front, but it was more powerful than partisan identity. That is, that you were more willing to take in Muslims if you had the imagination statement and were a Republican than if you didn't have the imagined statements and were a Democrat. And so in these partisan times, it's nice to know that there are some techniques that are more powerful than even partisanship. And so can we use this in our fundraising? And my guess is that you've already guessed that yes, we can, or else Nick wouldn't be talking about it, and you'd be right. So this was a test that we did at Donor Voice, my previous job, with an international relief charity, in email. And they took one of their emails and actually used the same phrase from the study about the Syrian conflict. That was test one. Test two was they added in the subject line, what if it were you? That subject line actually didn't matter. But having that imagined phrase at the top of the email led to higher gift rates and higher revenues, higher response, and even high average gifts in there. So causing people to imagine triggers empathy, it triggers mirror neurons, it triggers those things that we know that make people want to give. So it can be a very powerful thing in fundraising. And if you can't get someone to experience something up front, you can't get them to experience clean air, you can't get them to experience what it's like to be a refugee, those sorts of things. You can ask them to imagine what it would be like, and that closes a lot of that gap. So please let me know any questions about that. And then we have an interesting study that just came out from some very good researchers that had some odd conclusions. There's this oft debated topic: do we give for ourselves or do we give for others? Is it purely altruistic, or do we seek the warm glow of giving? And so what they did is, in Alaska, everyone gets money from the government that's a portion of the oil revenues from the state. And there is a push to get people to donate some or part, all or some of that to charity. And so the researchers went in and they did a postcard that said, let's donate to charity. They had two different positionings. One is, let's make Alaska better for everyone. Share your PFD, your distribution from the state. And so that's other focused. And then there's the benefit to yourself. Warm your heart, share your PFD. So you're saying, as a result of this, I'm going to feel better about myself. So, which was more effective? The warm glow, the self-benefit, won handily. That's this third column over here. Significantly higher donation rates, significantly higher average donation, and so just a win across the board. Now, the trick is that for some reason, they had different groups. They did a random assignment, but people were different before the treatment. And so you can see before the treatment, the control and the self group look pretty much like each other. They had previously given $91 and $97. The donation rate was 4.6, 4.6. But the others group, the people who they said, this right column, the people who they said had this big jump up, had a 5.8% donation rate. And so when you look at the postcard and at the treatment, yes, there was this jump up from, if you were looking at control, 4.5 to 5.8% response rate, but a lot of that was present already. And so this makes the change far less dramatic. Year over year, the response rate change was down 4% among the control group. It was only down 1% in self and others. And the average gift change was 17% in the control group, 19% in the self group, and 23% among others. So still a difference. It still gives you, warm glow is still the best way of framing that. And you did have this increase in average gift, and you didn't have as big a decrease in response rate. But not as dramatic as the authors had framed it. And that effect went away the next year. So going from the treatment year to the year after, you see this drop off in response rate. And so from the year before and the year after, you have fundamentally the same revenues coming in and out, about a 42% increase in control, self, and others. So it's a 1 year change. Not surprising. You don't expect the direct mail piece you send out today probably will not have a huge impact on whether someone gives a year from now. You'd like it to, doesn't always. And so this is a really interesting kind of cautionary tale, because here is how the authors framed this in their abstract. They said that individuals who received the importance of appeal of self to others, they were 4.5% more likely to give, and gave 20% more than counterparts in the control group, which is true, but they were also giving a lot more in the previous year. So important to read into these studies. They also say we found evidence of long run effects of warm glow appeal. However, when you take out where they were before they started the test, that evidence of long run effect disappears entirely. So interesting study, good study, but the framing is a little bit weird. The upshot of it is read your studies, and then also that warm glow, that sense of what you're doing for yourself is very important. And those who have been to previous tests of the month, you've heard me talk about how, and I'm happy to review this if this is something that folks want to see, but it's not about the emotion that you cause with your appeals. It's about the emotion that you promise people will get as a result of giving. People are looking for, people are projecting themselves forward and saying, how will I feel as a result of giving? And if they don't think they're going to feel better as a result of their giving, they won't give, regardless of how bad you made them feel. So, any questions on either of these studies? While we're waiting for folks to write it in the Q&A or in the questions, let me say thank you for joining. We'd love to have folks presenting on these calls. So what are your tests that you're doing so that we get that practitioner's eye view? Also, we want to be able to answer questions that you have. So feel free to write in to me with your questions. I'm at nellinger, that's Nellinger, at More DM Group, that's mooredmgroup.com. Love to hear from you. Also, you can hit up the TNPA. They always know where to find me and help with gathering this research and say what we should be looking at. So, not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have after this at that email address. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a good day.